So I had an issue with my daughter who needed a special pass for using the toilet or whatever at school. And secondary schools are really militant these days. They you can only go at certain times and they don't
Hmm.
let you go in class time and all that. Fine. But my daughter has a medical issue. So I contacted her head of year and I explained what the issue was and talked about how she's having difficulties and if she could help by issuing her a toilet pass.
Hmm.
And she was like, no, we don't issue toilet passes, and it's a real medical issue, and
Hmm.
that I should go and seek medical attention and a letter for my doctor. So I
Hmm.
did. I got on the phone, I called the doctor, and I was like, that's what I need. And I contacted her and I said, I'm in the process of getting that medical note. In the meantime, I don't want her to suffer any longer. Can you
Yeah.
please issue
Yeah.
her a pass? And she said, no. She said, not until we get the letter through, which was a whole week. It's not a medical emergency, isn't it? So
Yeah.
she didn't get a GP appointment until the next week. Um, and I thought, this is not right. Like, I found a chat on Chat GPT that my daughter had put in. It was like how to cope with struggling with
Oh,
toileting issues, and it was like do breathing exercises, do change your position, like all of this while she's in class. Like she should be learning, and she's trying to focus on not embarrassing herself. Anyway, so I said to my husband, I said, this is not right. Like, I don't want to talk to this head of year anymore. She's not listening. She's just following her procedure and not thinking about the wider issue.
yeah.
Who's my child? And so I said, I want you to contact the vice principal because my thinking is if he contacts the school as a male, first of
Hmm.
all, and if he contacts the school with his British sounding surname, that
Hmm.
he's going to be listened to. Lo and behold, the very next day, she was issued with a pass that allowed her to go to the toilet during playtimes, during class time. It's so disappointing because you want to believe that it's not really true. It's just like, but it's over and over again. It just proves what
Well,
I'm.
this is what I was going to say because I can already hear it. Yeah, but that's nothing to do with race. That's not, how do you know? Like, how do you know? So for all of those people out there who will be thinking you've got a chip on your shoulder, you're making everything about race these days.
Mm.
Gosh, you can't even walk down the street without you. What would you say?
May I mean, you can argue that it's not about race, but and I tried to argue to myself that it's not about race. Um, but over and over again, it's being proven to me that it is. I thought maybe we get nowhere. Maybe we get nowhere by making my husband write from his email address, with his full surname. Maybe we'd get nowhere, but we did, and it's not the first time. It
And I think
happened
that's,
again and
yeah.
again and again, and that just kind of proves to you that you know
And this is the thing, people can say, oh, that's a one-off situation, or it might just be because he spoke to the vice principal and therefore he thought actually this is the way forwards. And had you had the same conversation or corresponded in the same way, the same outcome would have happened because
Mm,
he was more senior to make that decision and this, that, and the other. But for me, the key thing with what you've said there is this is not the first time.
mm,
This is not the first time. It's not the first time within this context of education where different schools have taken the same approach. It's probably a bit of the intersectionality um, aspect as well. As you said, he's male, you're not. Um, but ultimately, these incidents, whilst they're one off in isolation, it's about that overall impact over time because
mhm,
it's not just about this one thing, this one time.
mm.
It's this one thing, this one time that's a repeat of what's happened with another one thing at another time
In
and a
another
time
school
before
with
and a time
exactly,
before in
exactly.
different in the same sector, i.e. education, but
Yeah.
the context of different schools with different people involved.
Mhm.
And for me, this is about identifying patterns, about us recognizing as a society that we're not happy with these patterns. And so we're going to do something
Mm,
about it.
mhm,
Not, oh, but you've got a chip on the on your shoulder, or this is just a one-off thing that's taken place, or making excuses. It is a pattern.
mm,
And we either think that these behaviors are wrong, in which case we have the courage to spot the pattern and then do something about it,
mhm,
or we go, yeah, but there isn't even a pattern because it's just this one-off thing and it's all down to you. Again, I think most of us are ready and want to be aware of where patterns exist and what those patterns show.
mm,
The query is, well, then what do you do about it? And so for me, from the perspective of a school, surely these conversations around senior leadership tables need to take place where we are thinking around who has raised queries, who has raised concerns with us,
mm,
what are their backgrounds in terms of the parents, the families, and what's the pattern of our response for them.
mhm,
Only then will we actually know whether or not we're leaning into our own perceptions and viewpoints and assumptions around people or not.
mm,
But it's down to leaders to ask themselves the questions and create that space where they can actually unpick and identify where patterns may well exist rather than saying, oh no, so and so's just being dramatic or there's nothing to see here. Because
yeah.
there's always something to see. It's virtually impossible to have a space, any context of learning, any context of an organization that operates completely differently to outside.
Mhm,
Organizations are microcosms of society. We are
absolutely.
in a society that is misogynist, misogynist one that is not welcoming to people who are Muslim,
Mm,
one that is racist
mhm,
around other areas too, and is one that's patriarchal,
absolutely.
one that's homophobic. Like we can keep going, and we can list those that don't. One that doesn't take disability
Mhm,
seriously, but
mhm.
like all of it. So why on earth would we think and assume that the organizations in which we work in are completely free of
Any
all of
different?
that?
You might assume because this particular organization and this particular head of year was a Muslim lady, and so you could assume that they don't work under these systems, but they absolutely do. They absolutely do.
And until these questions and reflections are woven through culture and routine, those assumptions will never be unpicked and so will just be perpetuated and reinforced.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's hard. It's hard because as a parent, you just want the best for your child,
Yeah,
and what if you came from a one parent house? What if your daughter came from a one parent household?
absolutely. And you want you give yourself your children to these establishments thinking that they want the best for your child as you want the best for your child. But then, these systems are in place, and I understand systems have to be in place, but also if a parent is appealing to you and saying to you, this is happening, this is my situation. Everyone's situation is different. No one is asking for any special treatment, but
Yeah,
where
yeah.
there needs to be some consideration for a person,
Well, yeah,
then
because we're talking about people. We're not talking about numbers. We're talking about people. And the fact that, in your child's case, there is a query entered on ChatGPT, that's not good.
she's trying to sort the problem out herself.
As a
You know,
child, as a child,
yeah,
why on earth would that burden be given to children?
because systems need to be upheld.
Tough, tough, and tough as a parent too,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. My question is, if global majority people in this country and all the different groups that we are separated into in order to divide us, if we are being tolerated, then what are we doing to the, I don't know what to call it,
Global minority.
yeah, if we are being tolerated, right,
Hmm.
our differences and our cultures, you know, we're just gonna deal with you. And what are we doing on the other side? We're being tolerated, we're being accepted and invited in, right?
Hmm.
And almost our backgrounds are forgotten about in those situations. So you're
Yes.
not Rachel, a black lady, and I am not
Yes.
Hind, a Muslim Arab lady. I'm not.
Yes.
But and we can communicate. The moment I bring up my identity, that's when things get awkward. Okay, all right.
Hmm.
Let's pretend I haven't brought up my identity.
Hmm.
They are tolerating us. What are we doing on the other side?
In that moment,
Yeah, in that scenario.
we are hoping and wishing and praying that this can last for as long as possible.
Because that's
We,
that's how we spend our lives. This is what we're doing. We're around that table. We're
yeah,
trying not.
we're tone policing, we are self-altering, we are, yeah, we're
So
doing all of that.
all they're doing is tolerating and trying to accept that we are different from them. We have different experiences, right?
Hmm.
But what we're doing is exactly that. We're assimilating to a
Yeah,
structure and a
because of
culture that
yes, because of colonialism is that's
yeah.
my thing. I think we're still operating in a with a and from a colonialist mindset where
Mm,
we are hoping to soothe, we are worried about our own opinion and verbalizing or vocalizing our own opinion in case that ruptures stuff or makes people feel uncomfortable. We're putting other people's feelings, thoughts, ways before our own.
mm,
And and I know why. I know why. And I'm not even saying that the why is invalid because I don't think it is. But for me, this is why we need to have more people from a wide range of backgrounds at the top of organizations. But even when that happens, because of white supremacy, you can have a person of color, you can have a Muslim person in positions of authority who are still very much upholding white supremacy, who
yeah,
are still
absolutely.
not upholding anti-racist systems, values, and ways.
Mm,
And so it's not just about having people in leadership positions, although for me that's a huge part of it. The next bit is yes, but what are the values and systems implemented and embedded in the organization led by that person
mm.
at the top of the tree? Because colonialism's real.
Why do you
It's
think like the past three oh what's the title now? Forgotten the title. Home secretaries. The past
yeah,
three have not been white people
yeah.
and have had
Well,
a very
three,
colonialist
yeah, mindset. I
mindset.
mean, you could say that. You could look at the leader of the Conservative Party. You know, you could. There are many people in positions of authority who are black or brown, um, who are not Christian, who also do not uphold anti-racist stances, viewpoints, because the wider system they're operating in isn't yet ready for that.
Mm,
The question is, well, how can we make the macro more ready? And for me, I think we individually, whether we're thinking about individual groups or we're thinking about us as individual people, I think there's a lot of power we hold and we don't realize it.
mm,
And we don't knit powers together to create that domino effect.
mm,
I think great change can come from one person, propped up by others behind, whether we're thinking about others being spiritual guidance or ancestors or whatever, or wider community support. Um, but great change can come from one. And I think that fear stops lots of us. You
mm.
know, what we've got to do is collectivize, come together, organize, and utilize our individual power, but collectively to put pressure on.
Mm,
Because there are more people who exist who want the right things to happen, who genuinely believe in equity, fill in the blank for any, protected characteristic, not just race. Um, I think there are more people who genuinely believe in that, but they just don't know how to do that. And that's why coming together is really, really important,
mm,
whilst remaining committed to self-work.
mm. And
Yeah.
also, they're not the people who have, well, who have the perceived power. The
Yeah.
ones.
And they might not have that organization power, but when people stop working,
Mm,
that's where, organizations realize who actually holds the power.
mm.
I'm not endorsing anybody to go on strike, but what I'm saying is we
Disclaimer.
do we have, yeah, that's a disclaimer. Because we have more power than we like to believe, you
Mm,
know?
mhm. So we were
Yeah.
saying, why is it hard for people who are facing racism or experiencing racism in the workplace or wherever? Why is it hard for them to speak up and say something about it? Alert a manager, make a complaint, make it formal. Why is it so difficult? What stops them?
A lot. Um, I think that it's really hard for people to to speak up, to speak out when they're on the receiving end of quote unquote banter, whether they're on the receiving end on something of something intentional. I think it's really hard, and I think it's hard for a few reasons. I think it's layered. I think one is we have to still survive, and we have to turn up the next day, or we have to continue that day, or the world doesn't stop turning because we've had an episode or an experience.
Mm,
I think previous encounters and experiences in life has taught us that there's just no point, because life can get a little bit more challenging for you. You're opening up stuff,
yeah.
you're talking to people that don't have lived experience, they're questioning, over questioning. You start to then question yourself. And why go there if there's no need? Because the same outcome will be what it is. So I think that's another reason. And then something you mentioned earlier on around overburdening
Yeah.
bosses
Yeah.
or managers or somebody that's more senior to you who you've reported it to, that you might well have a really good relationship with. You're thinking, well, if I share this, I'm giving you more work to do.
Mm,
There's an aspect potentially of, am I letting you down?
mhm. Am I giving you?
Because
Yeah.
yeah, by virtue of me sharing this is an indication of something not being quite right in
Mm,
your space, in your organization,
mm,
particularly when you know that people are trying to cultivate positive cultures, right? And then you're
mm.
you're saying, not, actually, this isn't right. This is what I've experienced.
I think it's also got to do with, imagine like there's 150 things happening in the world, right? In the news, in our local areas, in across the Atlantic, there's always stuff going on. And in your workplace, it's kind of a bit of a bubble where you feel a bit protected, right? And obviously everybody knows what's going on in the workplace around the world. And then when you suddenly bring up this issue that's happening here in this establishment, like in our little safe space,
Yeah,
it's a bit scary.
yeah,
And then it opens up like lots of other conversations. It could open up lots of other conversations, and
yeah,
it's too big to deal with. And so just don't mention it, or don't remind us that this stuff is happening in the world, this terrible awful racism or whatever that's happening. Please don't remind us that's happening. We're in this little safe space, and we don't want to discuss that. We don't want to face the real world and face the real problems that are happening.
yeah. But then that comes at a cost. So I think the cost now is being more accurately measured in terms of our physical well-being, as well as our mental
Yeah.
health well-being that we carry. I think there's a direct correlation between Black and brown women's physical health and the suppression of experience that's negative,
Mm.
and this holding on to it and not wanting to pass it on for all the reasons we've spoken about. I think if we have a look at the the disproportionate level of people who experience fibroids,
Mm,
my theory and thinking is because all of this trauma that's being held down and suppressed, it has to come out somehow.
yeah.
And if we're able to find outlets that are supportive for our mental and emotional well-being, then fine, great. But it's that physical
Mm,
knock-on effect and impact. And I think that there's lots of research going into looking at the disproportionate experience of fibroids and other female health
mhm.
concerns. And I think racism um, is part of that reason. And I think this holding down is coming out in our bodies at a later point. So I think it does come at a cost. I also think it comes at the cost of us querying who we can trust in the workplace and who we can't trust in the
Mm,
workplace,
mhm,
and how we have to hibernate a little bit more because we're unsure of who to speak with.
mhm,
Um, and I think the longer term cost and payout of that is we don't get to join the club in
mm,
inverted commas
mhm,
because we are more withdrawn.
mhm.
And I think that the club then can be quite narrow in outlook, in makeup, in perspective,
Yeah,
which overall disadvantages workplace culture and
absolutely.
perspective.
Do you think like
Yeah,
sometimes when you're around a table and you're not the majority around the table, sometimes people forget your background, or they forget your religion, or they forget that you're from a different race, right? Because you're talking the talk and you're walking the walk. And then the moment that you say, actually, I'd like to talk about this issue, you're kind of in their face reminding them that you're a Muslim or you're a black woman or whatever you might be. And it's like, oh, this is it's in my face now, and you don't know how to act to it. And I think on two sides. Firstly, the courage to step up and say, yeah, I'm from this community and I want to speak about this thing. But on the other side, it's like, oh, you've just reminded me that you're from this community. And I have to now address this issue because you brought it up.
yeah. So I find what you've said there really important. And not that it's the only important thing you've ever said, but this bit in particular is really important because this idea of us living in a post-race time where I don't see colour is possible is 100% in our faces as being completely and utterly untrue. But I think that was the sense, particularly around 2012 in the UK.
Mm,
You know, we think about the Olympics, the London 2012 Olympics, and we had people from a range of backgrounds holding up the Union Jack very, very proudly. And it was like, yes, we're there, we've done it. Maybe we don't really need to focus on this stuff anymore, you know. The anti-Muslim hate that we saw following 9/11 started to wane a little bit.
mhm,
You know, all of the other forms of racial hate started to wane a little bit, and we could sort of gather behind this common narrative. And this sense of belonging and togetherness was definitely there more now than it was there then than it is now.
mhm,
But you scratch beneath the surface, even at that point, and it's being the ugly face nature of a British value called tolerance. And I think that those British values are actually accurate.
mhm,
I think we have been tolerated and put up with.
mhm,
We haven't been welcomed.
mhm,
Um, but I think now we have that rupture of the reality of the situation. We were almost fooled into thinking that this was a space and a place where we were welcomed and we had that sense of belonging. And whether we're thinking about the national context and picture or whether we're thinking about a decision making table,
mhm,
by virtue of not being racialized as white, not being somebody from a middle class background, not being Christian as a religious leaning or belief set, um, not being somebody who's university educated, by nature of you being around any decision making table, means that you're rupturing a little bit.
Mm, mm,
And for reasons of progression, for ease, for peace, sometimes it's easy or easier to try to sit back and hope that your visible difference isn't visible.
mm,
So that, can we just go back to that 2012 time? Can I just be quiet at this moment?
mm,
And again, that comes at a cost because number one, the reality of our existence means that we are physically rupturing this national fabric, this cultural fabric, this decision making fabric, just anyway. And
mhm,
we can try to fool ourselves and say, yeah, but if we just pretend that we are not fill in the blank, and if we can just go along with, then it's fine. Well, actually, it's not fine.
mm,
So I think that we're now in 2026 where that rupturing is more present
mhm.
than silent.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And but I think it's always been there. It's just been easier for us uh, to neuter a little
Mhm,
bit or to
mhm,
tame a little bit or keep under our hats a little bit. Um, but actually, I think we've got to own our identity a little bit more confidently.
mm,
I think we've got to understand that our presence is a natural rupture anyway.
mm,
You know, people like us were not meant to.
mhm,
We weren't meant to. Uh, I wrestle with this concept of childhood, as you well know, a lot, and who gets to be a child and a Victorian perspective of a childhood.
mhm.
But during those times, you and I, as children, wouldn't even be given the grace of any aspect of that, you
Yeah.
know, and that is because of the visible identity markers and
Mm,
religious beliefs that we have or that you have. I don't, and it's fascinating, but it comes at a cost.
yeah.
So what am I saying? I think I'm saying we have to own our identities in their fullness
Mm,
and not make them muted. Now more than ever, we can't mute them anyway, because
no.
we're in this 2026 space context.
Mhm,
The geopolitical nature of the
mm,
world means that we are a threat. We are seen as a terrorist, seen as a left-wing anarchist, seen
mhm,
as a thug, seen as a monkey.
yeah.
And I'm obviously harping back to the Donald Trump's Truth account, where he put the pictures of Barack and Michelle Obama on apes. So that's where we're at now. We don't have the grace to hide, and I think that means we've got to be even more courageous. But also know where to ask for help and who to locate for help because it's tough.
I think that's really important actually. It's the asking for help, but help doesn't have to look like, hi, I need help.
No,
It's in society. It's in our identifying with each other and finding those common identifiers between us. And I think that we live in such an isolated society at the moment.
yes,
Everyone is so individual in their struggle, whatever minority you belong to. Um,
yes,
but there's only a few of them.
yes,
There's many,
yes,
many, many more of us.
yeah, 100%. But this fabric of belonging has been completely decimated. And in order to stitch together this common thread of humanity, this work over understanding the identities we carry needs to happen.
Mm,
Because unless we understand each other for who each other are, whoever the other are, from our individual perspective and viewpoint, we cannot come together to find the commonalities.
mm.